He thought it was just another silent halo jump into frozen wilderness, the kind that left no trace behind. The forest waited below, cold and endless, as he touched down beneath a sky of drifting snow. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind, a broken whimper trembling through the trees. He followed it past frost-bitten pines until his light revealed a German shepherd trapped deep in a hidden pit, shaking from pain and cold. What stopped him wasn't the injury, but the look in the dog's eyes. Not fear, not panic, but a quiet plea to be seen. In that moment, the mission faded, and something older than duty stirred within him. He didn't see a stray. He saw a soul still fighting to survive, and a choice that would change everything that followed. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit subscribe so you never miss another story of loyalty, courage, and heart. Your support truly means the world. Late February wrapped the White Mountain National Forest in a heavy stillness. Snow blanketed the ground in thick layers, muting the world beneath it. The light faded early here, swallowed by tall pines and narrow valleys that rarely saw the sun in winter. Chief Petty Officer Rowan Cross, 36, descended into that silence without a sound. He moved with the quiet precision of a man shaped by years of combat, broad-shouldered, power held in restraint rather than force. His beard was kept short, flecked with gray that didn't belong to age alone. Deep-set eyes scanned the terrain with practiced calm, yet behind them lived a weight that never fully slept. Rowan was the kind of man who carried his past without complaint, even when it cut deep. This mission was meant to be simple, a high-altitude halo insertion into the remote backcountry of New Hampshire. The objective? Confirm the presence of an unauthorized radio relay suspected of coordinating black market movement of modified civilian drones and decommissioned military equipment. No engagement, no interference. Observe, mark, withdraw, clean and quiet. The kind of mission Rowan preferred. Snow whispered beneath his boots as he advanced through the forest. The cold crept into his gloves, biting enough to keep him sharp. Everything felt still, too still. No birds, no wind through branches, only the soft rhythm of his own breathing. Then he heard it, not the wind, not the shifting of ice, a sound, thin, strained, barely clinging to the air, a whimper. Rowan froze. He tilted his head, listening again. The sound came once more, faint and uneven, drifting through the trees like a thread about to snap. It wasn't human, but it wasn't wild either. His body responded before thought. He adjusted course, moving downslope with controlled steps, scanning the ground as snow deepened around his boots. The scent reached him next. Iron, cold fur, and something else. Pain. His light swept across the forest floor and caught the edge of something wrong. A depression in the snow. Too precise to be natural. Branches and broken limbs had been arranged across it, lightly dusted with snow. A trap. Rowan crouched and brushed aside the covering. Beneath it yawned a narrow pit, roughly 6 feet deep, its sides packed hard from repeated movement. At the bottom lay a German shepherd. The dog was large, powerfully built even now, though his body trembled from cold. One leg was scraped raw, twisted slightly beneath him. His breath came in shallow bursts, fogging the frozen air. But he did not panic. He did not bark or thrash. Instead, he lifted his head and looked up. His eyes were clear, alert, pain-filled, but steady. And in that instant, Rowan felt something tighten deep in his chest. Those eyes. He had seen them before. Years ago, on a different continent, under a burning sky, another dog had looked at him that way. Rook, his partner, his shield. The one who had run forward when the ground gave way, taking the blast meant for the team. Rowan still remembered kneeling in the dust, hands shaking, promising a dying dog he wouldn't let the sacrifice mean nothing. Now, in the frozen quiet of this forest, that same look stared back at him. Not fear, not surrender, a plea. The wind rose suddenly. carrying snow through the trees. The first warning of a storm rolling in fast. Visibility dropped. The forest seemed to close around the pit. Rowan exhaled slowly, grounding himself. "I'm here," he murmured, though he wasn't sure who he was speaking to anymore. The German shepherd held his gaze, unmoving, trusting. Rowan looked up at the darkening sky, then back down at the dog. He had come here to observe and leave unseen. But some moments refused to be ignored. As the first heavy flakes began to fall, Rowan made a decision he knew would change everything. He would not walk away again. And as the storm gathered its strength above them, he began planning how to get them both out alive. Snow thickened as Rowan knelt at the edge of the pit, breath slow and controlled. The storm was closing in, but the forest around him remained eerily still, as if holding its breath along with him. He secured his rope around the trunk of a sturdy pine, testing the tension twice before trusting it with his weight. The German shepherd watched every movement. Its eyes followed his hands as he looped the rope, tied a secure anchor, and fashioned a makeshift harness from his spare webbing. There was no panic in the animal's posture, no thrashing, only quiet endurance, the kind born not from instinct but from training. Rowan lowered himself into the pit, boots finding purchase against frozen soil. The cold bit harder down here, leaching warmth through his gear. Up close, he could see the dog more clearly. Thick black and tan fur dulled by frost, muscles still strong beneath exhaustion, chest rising in shallow but steady rhythm. "You're all right," he murmured, voice low and even. "I've got you." The dog didn't flinch. He shifted slightly, allowing Rowan to examine the injured leg. The joint was swollen, scraped raw by ice and stone, but not broken. Painful, yes. Fatal, no. Rowan worked carefully, his movements precise. He checked breathing, pulse, pupils. Everything pointed to shock setting in, but not yet overwhelming. He wrapped thermal lining from his pack around the dog's torso, then stabilized the leg with a splint fashioned from a broken branch and reinforced cord. The dog endured it all in silence. That unsettled him. Most strays fought. Most animals panicked. This one didn't. His restraint felt learned, trained. When Rowan finally signaled for the ascent, the dog leaned into him without hesitation. Together they rose from the pit, slow and deliberate, snow whispering down around them. Above ground, Rowan cleared a space behind a fallen log where the wind was weakest. He laid down his thermal blanket and eased the dog onto it, shielding him from the gale. From his canteen, he warmed a small amount of water and let the dog drink in slow, measured sips. The animal accepted it carefully, never rushing, never spilling a drop. Rowan exhaled through his nose. "You're not wild," he said quietly. "You're trained." The dog's ears twitched, but he remained still. Rowan reached for his satellite radio, angling the antenna until a faint signal crackled through the static. "Falcon 1, this is Cross," he said. "I've got a situation." A pause, then a familiar voice cut through the interference. "Rowan? Damn, you're a long way off grid." Lieutenant Grant Ellery, 38, calm as ever, broad-shouldered with close-cropped dark hair and a voice shaped by years of command. Grant had the kind of steadiness that made people listen even when everything else fell apart. He'd pulled Rowan out of more than one impossible situation. And once, years ago, Rowan had returned the favor. "I've got an injured K9, Rowan said. "Not military-tagged, but trained. Need med support. Closest option?" Silence stretched. Wind hissed over the channel. "Closest full veterinary facility is over 2 hours out," Grant replied. "And that's in good weather." Rowan glanced at the sky. The snowfall was thickening. "Not an option," he said. Grant exhaled slowly. "There is one place. A ranger cabin about 2 miles east. Belongs to Mara Kincaid." The name landed with quiet weight. "Mara?" Rowan repeated. "Yeah," Grant said. "Early 30s, former Army medic. Left after a bad surgical loss, K9 unit. She's been with Forest Service search and rescue since. Knows the terrain better than anyone up there. If anyone can help that dog, it's her. Rowan looked down at the German shepherd, who watched him with calm, unwavering focus. "Is she still active?" he asked. "Always," Grant replied, "and she doesn't turn people away." Rowan ended the transmission and secured his pack. Snow was falling harder now, the forest growing indistinct at the edges. He tightened his grip, slid one arm beneath the dog's chest and the other beneath his hind legs. The dog didn't resist. He leaned into Rowan's shoulder as if he understood where they were going. Rowan adjusted his footing and began moving through the snow, every step measured, every breath controlled. Behind him, the pit disappeared beneath falling white. Ahead, somewhere beyond the trees, a small cabin waited, and with it, the first fragile chance that neither of them would have to face the night alone. The cabin appeared through the snowfall like a memory half forgotten. A low structure of dark timber crouched beneath the weight of winter. A thin thread of smoke rose from its chimney, bending with the wind. Rowan adjusted his grip and pushed forward, boots burning with effort as the forest finally loosened its hold. The door opened before he could knock. Mara Kincaid stood framed by firelight, her hand already gripping the edge of the doorframe. She was 33. Lean from years of working the land and moving through rough terrain, her posture steady but alert. Auburn hair, streaked lighter by the sun, was pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder. Her skin was pale from winter, faint freckles dusting her cheeks. Her eyes, sharp, observant, the kind that missed very little, dropped instantly to the dog in Rowan's arms. "Bring him in," she said, voice firm but calm. "Now." The warmth inside hit like a wave. Mara moved with practiced efficiency, clearing space near the iron stove. She knelt immediately, unafraid, unhesitating, her hands already checking the dog's breathing and pupils. "Easy, easy," she murmured, not to Rowan, but to the animal. "You're safe here." She fed logs into the stove, flames licking higher, then grabbed thick towels and a thermal blanket. Snow melted off the dog's fur as she worked, drying him carefully, methodically. Her hands were steady, surgeon steady, as she cleaned the abrasions along his leg with antiseptic, checking for swelling, testing the joint with gentle precision. "He's cold, but stable," she said quietly. "Sprained leg, no fractures. That's good." Rowan exhaled, tension easing for the first time since the forest. He helped where she pointed, warming water, breaking off small pieces of dried ration to soften for feeding, adjusting the blanket to shield the dog from drafts. The animal accepted their care with quiet patience, breathing slow, eyes tracking movement without fear. "He's disciplined," Mara observed. "Too calm for a stray." Rowan nodded. "That's what I thought." She glanced up at him then, really looking for the first time. His broad frame, the tension he carried even at rest, the faint scars along his hands, the way he stood slightly angled toward the door, as if guarding it without thinking. "You've done this before," she said. Rowan didn't answer right away. The fire cracked softly between them. "His name was Rook," he finally said. "K9. He went ahead of us once, cleared the path, didn't make it back." Mara's expression softened. Not pity, but recognition. She nodded slowly. "I lost one, too," she said. "His name was Ash. He was on my table during a field surgery. Internal bleeding I couldn't stop. I still hear his breathing sometimes, when the nights get too quiet." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind pressed against the cabin walls, but inside, something steadied. They worked in quiet rhythm after that. Rowan gathered firewood and reinforced the door seams against the cold. Mara monitored the dog's temperature, adjusting blankets, murmuring reassurance whenever his breathing shifted. At one point, she gently placed a hand on Rowan's arm. "He trusts you," she said softly. Rowan looked down. The German shepherd had shifted closer to him, resting his head near Rowan's knee. "He's listening," Mara added, "waiting." The dog stirred as the hours passed, never fully sleeping. His ears twitched at every sound outside. When the fire popped, he lifted his head. When the wind howled, his gaze fixed on the door. He only settled when the door remained slightly ajar, as if needing to watch the world beyond. Mara noticed it too. "That's not fear," she murmured. "That's vigilance." Rowan followed the dog's line of sight. The forest beyond the window lay still, heavy with snow and shadow. "He's trained," Mara said quietly. "Not just obedience, awareness, protection. He's waiting for something, or someone." The realization sat between them, unspoken but heavy. They took turns through the night. Rowan stayed awake while Mara rested. Then she rose again to check vitals, gently stroking the dog's fur, whispering steady reassurances. Outside, the storm eased, but the silence that followed felt watchful. Just before dawn, the dog lifted his head again, ears pricked, body tense. Not in fear, in recognition. Rowan and Mara exchanged a glance. Something out there was moving, and whatever had left this dog in the forest hadn't finished its story yet. Morning came quietly, the kind that didn't wake the forest but slipped into it. Pale light filtered through the frost-coated windows, soft enough to blur the line between night and day. Inside the cabin, warmth lingered, but unease remained. The German shepherd was already awake. He had not slept deeply through the night. Rowan noticed it the moment he opened his eyes. The way the dog sat upright, ears angled toward the door, muscles taut beneath his fur. He hadn't touched the food Mara had set out earlier. Instead, he paced in short, restless arcs, letting out low sounds that barely passed as whines. Mara watched from the stove, her brow tightening. "He's not in pain," she said softly. "This is something else." The dog moved to the door and scratched once, then again, not frantic, intentional. Rowan crouched beside him. "You want us to follow you, don't you?" The dog met his gaze, tail still, eyes steady. Then he turned toward the door and waited. Rowan exhaled through his nose. "All right," he murmured. "Show me." Outside, the forest was hushed beneath fresh snowfall. The storm had passed, leaving the world muffled and pale. The dog moved with purpose, limping slightly but never slowing, guiding Rowan along a narrow path between the trees. Mara followed at a careful distance, pulling her jacket tight against the cold. They didn't have to walk far. The dog stopped at the edge of a shallow rise and began to dig. Snow scattered as his paws worked fast, purposeful. Within moments, something dark emerged beneath the white. Metal, dulled and scratched, half frozen into the earth. The dog nudged it upward with his nose until Rowan could grasp it. A badge. Rowan wiped the snow away slowly. Officer Bennett Sloan. Badge number 3174. His jaw tightened. Mara inhaled sharply behind him. "Bennett," she whispered. "That's Officer Sloan, from Pine Hollow. Everyone knows him." She took a step closer, her voice lower now. "He's been on the force nearly a decade. Calm, fair. The kind who checks on elderly folks during storms. He volunteers with the Youth Rescue Program." Rowan studied the badge in his palm. It was scratched but intact, the chain torn clean through. "This wasn't dropped by accident," he said. The dog let out a low sound, not a growl, but something heavier, a vibration that seemed to carry memory. His ears tilted toward the woods beyond the ridge, as if listening for something long gone. "He's looking for his partner," Mara said quietly, "or for answers." Rowan nodded. The pieces were starting to take shape, and none of them were good. They returned to the cabin in silence. Inside, the fire still glowed faintly. Rowan set the badge on the table between them. For a moment, neither spoke. "This changes things," Mara said finally. "If Bennett is missing, and his dog ended up in a trap like that, this isn't an accident." Rowan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "It's too clean, too deliberate." Mara hesitated, then nodded. "I've heard rumors. Poachers pushing farther north. Smarter ones, organized." She paused. "But if law enforcement's involved, or targeted—" Rowan didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. He moved to the window and tried his radio again. Static cracked back at him. Faint, unstable. Civilian frequencies were unreliable this deep into the forest, and he wasn't about to broadcast on a military channel without confirmation. Not yet. Too many unknowns, he said quietly. If we call the wrong people, we tip our hand. Mara studied him, weighing the risk. She trusted her instincts. And for the first time in a long while, she trusted someone else's just as much. The dog lay near the door now, watching the forest with unwavering focus. His body was calm, but every sense remained alert, as if he were listening to a signal only he could hear. "He's not lost," Mara said softly. "He's waiting." Rowan looked at the dog, then back toward the trees beyond the window. Somewhere out there, a man was missing. Somewhere, a truth was buried beneath the snow, and whatever had started this wasn't finished yet. Outside, the wind shifted again, brushing against the cabin walls like a warning. Night came quietly, like a held breath. The forest around the cabin had gone still again, the kind of silence that pressed against the ears rather than soothing them. Inside, the fire burned low. The German shepherd lay near the door, body resting, but senses alert, ears lifting at sounds no one else could hear. Rowan sat near the window, half-shadowed, watching the dark tree line. His posture was loose, but his focus was sharp, the kind forged by years of operating in places where danger arrived without warning. Mara moved softly behind him, checking the kettle, keeping the cabin warm without drawing attention. Her calm was practiced, born from years of working alone in remote places where panic only made things worse. Then the sound came, a low, mechanical hum. Rowan's head lifted instantly. His gaze sharpened. "Snowmobiles," he murmured. The sound grew louder, then split. More than one engine. Rowan rose slowly, motioning Mara toward the back of the cabin. The dog stood at once, muscles taut, body angled toward the door. Headlights appeared between the trees, cutting white scars through the darkness. 3 men approached on snowmobiles, stopping just beyond the clearing. They dismounted with practiced ease, movements controlled, alert. Not lost hikers, not locals. One of them stepped forward first, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark insulated jacket with the hood pulled low. His beard was trimmed but uneven, like someone who didn't bother with mirrors anymore. His eyes moved constantly, scanning windows, shadows, tree lines. Another man followed, slimmer, younger, his movements quicker, almost nervous. The third stayed near the machines, silent, posture rigid, hand resting near his belt. Rowan shifted slightly, angling his body to shield the interior without blocking the view. A knock came at the door, firm, practiced. Mara opened it just enough to speak. "Evening," the first man said. His voice was calm, friendly in tone but hollow beneath it. "Sorry to bother you this late. We're from a regional K9 training center. One of our dogs went missing earlier today." Mara's expression didn't change. "Haven't seen anyone," she said evenly. The man's eyes flicked past her shoulder, scanning the cabin interior. "You sure? We heard a radio signal earlier." Rowan remained silent, watching. The man's stance shifted subtly. Weight on the balls of his feet, ready to move. Not a search and rescue posture. "No one's been here," Mara repeated. A pause. Then the man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if you see anything, you let us know." They turned and walked back toward the machines. As the engines roared to life and faded into the trees, something metallic clinked softly against the snow near the cabin steps. Rowan waited until the sound was gone. Then he stepped outside. Half buried near the step was a metal lighter. Scuffed, heavy, engraved with a crude symbol, a triangle split by a diagonal slash. He turned it in his hand. "Professional," he muttered. "Not law enforcement." He held it out to the dog. The German shepherd leaned forward, sniffed once, then stiffened. His tail lowered. A low growl vibrated in his chest. "That's our lead," Rowan said quietly. Minutes later, they moved. The dog led the way, nose low, tracking the faint scent trail carried across the snow. Rowan followed, careful to step where the dog had, using the shallow impressions of snowmobile tracks that still cut through the white. The wind hadn't yet erased them. They traveled deeper into the forest until the trees thinned and the land dipped. There, half hidden by drifts and collapsed timber, stood the remains of an old logging camp. The structures were weather-worn, roofs sagging under snow, windows dark. But signs of recent activity were everywhere. Compressed tracks, fuel residue, broken branches dragged aside. The smell hit first. Metal, oil, fear. Rowan crouched near a stack of crates. Metal cages stood in rows, some empty, others occupied. Inside, animals huddled in silence, eyes wide, bodies tense. A tranquilizer dart lay half buried in the snow nearby. He swallowed hard. This wasn't opportunistic poaching. This was organized. Crates labeled with coded markings, ropes, transport harnesses, a makeshift loading ramp. Everything pointed to a systematic operation. Capture, containment, transport. The dog moved slowly, carefully, guiding Rowan deeper. His ears flattened, his body stiffened, and he let out a low sound. Not fear, but warning. Rowan followed his gaze. Beyond the cages, drag marks disappeared into the darkness. Long, uneven lines pressed into the snow. Someone had been pulled away. Rowan's jaw tightened. "This is where it started," he whispered. The dog stood beside him, steady and unyielding. Whatever had happened here wasn't over, and whoever had taken Officer Bennett Sloan wasn't far ahead. The abandoned logging camp lay quiet beneath the weight of snow, but Rowan knew better than to trust silence. He lay low behind a fallen beam, eyes tracking every shadow, every unnatural line in the dark. The air smelled of oil, damp wood, and fear that hadn't yet faded. The German shepherd moved beside him like a shadow-given breath. The dog was no longer limping. Pain still lingered in the stiffness of his gait, but instinct carried him forward. His ears pivoted with precision, catching distant movement long before Rowan could hear it. Together, they waited. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter. The first was tall and heavy-set, bundled in layered gear that muffled sound but slowed reaction. His face was partially hidden beneath a knit mask, beard untrimmed, eyes dull with fatigue. The second was leaner, restless, constantly shifting his weight, the kind of man whose nerves burned faster than his judgment. Rowan counted their steps, their rhythm, their blind spots. When the moment came, he moved. The first guard never saw him. Rowan closed the distance silently, locking an arm around the man's neck and pulling him backward into the shadows. A precise twist, a controlled descent. Unconscious before his body touched the snow. The second turned too late. The dog surged forward, low and fast, knocking him off balance with a clean strike to the legs. Before the man could shout, Rowan was already there, silencing him with a sharp blow and lowering him gently to the ground. No alarms, no voices, only breath and falling snow. They moved deeper into the camp. Rows of metal cages stood half buried beneath frost. Some were empty, others were not. Eyes reflected back from the darkness. Deer, foxes, smaller animals curled tight in fear. Rowan's jaw clenched. This wasn't opportunistic poaching. It was organized, methodical. Then the dog stopped. He lowered his head, muscles trembling, and let out a sound that wasn't quite a growl, something broken and aching. Rowan followed his gaze. A structure stood half-collapsed near the tree line, its door reinforced with metal mesh. Inside, barely visible through shadow and grime, was a man bound to a support beam. "Bennett?" Rowan whispered. Officer Bennett Sloan, 34, looked nothing like the calm figure described by the townspeople. His face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut. Dried blood darkened his collar and stained the front of his jacket. His hair, once neatly kept, hung damp against his forehead. But when he lifted his head, his eyes sharpened. Still alert, still fighting. Rowan moved fast. He disabled the guard posted nearby, cutting the man down silently before he could reach for his weapon. The dog stayed close, body angled protectively toward Bennett as Rowan worked on the restraints. "Easy," Rowan murmured. "You're safe now." Bennett exhaled a shaky breath, pain etched into every movement. "Knew he'd find me," he whispered, eyes flicking to the dog. The bindings gave way. Rowan caught him before he fell. "We're getting you out." There was no time to linger. Rowan slung Bennett's arm over his shoulder and signaled the dog forward. Together they moved through the maze of broken structures, keeping to shadows, letting the wind swallow their tracks. When they reached the tree line, Rowan stopped briefly. He tore open his medical kit, working with practiced efficiency, applying pressure to stop the bleeding, stabilizing a cracked rib, wrapping Bennett in insulation to preserve body heat. "Stay with me," Rowan said quietly. "Don't sleep." Bennett nodded weakly. They were moving animals," he rasped. "Selling them. Some trained, some not." Rowan's jaw tightened. "You're safe now." The dog pressed close, lending warmth, his presence grounding both men. Rowan chose a retreat path carefully, angling through uneven terrain, stepping across rock where snow would not hold tracks, doubling back once to confuse pursuit. It was slow, deliberate, exhausting, but necessary. By the time the cabin came into view through the trees, the sky had begun to pale. Dawn threatened the horizon. Rowan adjusted his grip on Bennett and pushed forward. They were almost there. The cabin door burst open under Rowan's shoulder, cold air rushing in as he carried Bennett inside. Snow clung to their boots, melting instantly against the warmth of the room. The fire still burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. Mara looked up and froze. For a split second, she didn't move. Her breath caught in her chest as she took in the man slumped against Rowan's shoulder. Blood-streaked jacket, bruised face, eyes barely open but fighting to stay that way. "Oh, God," she whispered. Then training took over. "Lay him down. Slowly." Mara dropped to her knees beside Bennett, hands already working with practiced urgency. She checked his pulse, his pupils, the rise of his chest. Her movements were firm, controlled, but her jaw was tight with emotion she didn't allow to surface. Bennett groaned softly. "Easy," she said, voice steady. "You're safe now." She cut away damaged fabric, cleaned blood from his skin, and pressed warm compresses against his torso. Her hands moved with certainty, years of emergency medicine still alive in her muscles. She set up a simple IV from her limited supplies, stabilizing his hydration while keeping his body temperature steady. Rowan knelt nearby, helping where she directed him, holding pressure, warming water, keeping the dog close but out of the way. The German shepherd never left Bennett's side. He lay close enough for their bodies to touch, eyes alert, ears twitching at every sound. When Bennett stirred, the dog pressed his head gently against his arm, grounding him. Bennett exhaled, voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I'd lost him." Mara glanced at Rowan. "He didn't leave," she said quietly. He waited. As the minutes passed, Bennett's breathing steadied. The color returned slowly to his face. When he could finally speak more clearly, his voice carried exhaustion layered with resolve. "I was tracking them for months," he said. "Small shipments at first. Traps, missing wildlife. Then equipment started showing up, military grade. Someone was funding it." Rowan leaned forward. "They caught you?" Bennett nodded. "I got too close. They figured it out. Kept me alive to pressure information out of me." His jaw tightened. "My dog got away. I prayed he would run." Mara's gaze softened. He did more than that. The room fell quiet for a moment. Rowan reached for his pack and removed a compact device, unfolding its antenna with practiced ease. The surface lights blinked faintly as he adjusted the frequency. "This channel punches through interference," he said. "Encrypted. Short range, but it'll reach the right people." He spoke calmly into the mic, voice steady despite the tension pressing in from all sides. He reported the situation. Missing officer recovered, Hostile operation confirmed. Civilians at risk. His tone sharpened when he requested immediate support. The response came after a brief delay. "Copy, Cross," the voice said, calm, commanding. "Situation confirmed. Mission parameters updated. You are now in protective custody mode. Hold position." Relief flickered briefly across Rowan's face. "Air support is inbound. Jump team en route. We're notifying U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and state DNR units. You are not alone out there." Rowan acknowledged and cut the channel. Outside, the wind howled louder, pushing against the cabin like a living thing. Inside, they prepared. Rowan moved with quiet precision, stringing thin lines across entry points, hanging empty cans and small metal scraps to create sound alarms. He positioned reflective surfaces near windows to distort light and set narrow fields of observation. Everything had a purpose. Mara assisted, mapping exits and blind spots, her knowledge of the terrain filling gaps Rowan couldn't see. Despite the fear pressing at the edges of her calm, her hands never trembled. Bennett, though weak, pointed out patterns he had noticed during captivity. How the men moved, where they hesitated, how they watched before acting. "They'll come back," he said. "They won't leave loose ends." The German shepherd lifted his head at that, eyes bright in the firelight. He shifted closer to Bennett, placing his body between the man and the door, a quiet guardian. The cabin fell into a tense stillness, every breath measured, every sound amplified. Outside, the storm gathered strength again, and somewhere beyond the trees, something was already moving toward them. The forest changed before the first sound reached them. Rowan felt it in the air, the pressure shift, the silence tightening as if the night itself were holding its breath. Outside the cabin, snow drifted sideways, bending under a rising wind that carried something unfamiliar. Predators. Atlas was on his feet instantly. His body stiffened, ears forward, every muscle drawn tight beneath his fur. No bark, no warning. Just instinct sharpened by training and something older. Loyalty forged through survival. "They're coming," Rowan said quietly. He didn't need confirmation. The way Atlas stared into the trees told him everything. Outside, movement unfolded in layers, not reckless, not rushed. Shadows passed between trunks, measured and patient. The first sound was faint, the mechanical hum of a low-flying drone cutting through the snowfall, scanning the ground in slow arcs. Moments later, another joined it, then another, their lights barely visible through the storm. They were hunting. Inside the cabin, Rowan shifted into motion. He signaled Mara back toward the far wall. She moved without hesitation, pulling Bennett further into cover. His breathing remained shallow but steady, eyes alert despite the pain. Rowan positioned himself near the window, rifle steady but restrained. He wasn't trying to win a fight. He was buying time. Outside, a single shot cracked through the night, striking the ground just beyond the cabin wall. A warning. Not lethal, a test. Snow sprayed into the air. Atlas growled low, stepping forward before Rowan could stop him. "Easy," Rowan whispered, but the dog was already moving. From the trees, a figure advanced. Tall, layered in dark gear, face hidden behind thermal lenses. He moved carefully, scanning heat signatures, unaware of how close death already stood. Atlas launched. Not reckless, precise. He collided with the man's legs, sending him crashing into the snow. A shout rang out, sharp and brief. Another figure shifted position, raising a weapon. And that was when Rowan moved. He dragged Mara back just as a round tore through the cabin wall, splintering wood inches from where she'd been standing. Pain flared across his shoulder as a fragment tore skin, but he forced it down. "Stay with Bennett," he barked. Mara pressed herself against the wall, one hand bracing the injured officer, the other steadying her breath. Her face was pale, but her eyes were focused. She wasn't panicking. She was surviving. Outside, the attack intensified. Footsteps crunched closer. Shadows multiplied. The cabin shook as something heavy slammed into the far wall. Snow poured through the cracks. Atlas reappeared, blood darkening his shoulder but his stance unbroken. He positioned himself between Rowan and the door, teeth bared, eyes locked on the darkness beyond. "Good boy," Rowan whispered. Another shot rang out. This time it grazed Rowan's arm. Pain flared, hot and sharp, but he stayed upright. He shifted position, drawing fire away from the cabin's center, forcing the attackers to adjust. That hesitation was all it took. The night erupted with a different sound. Deeper, mechanical, unmistakable. Rotors. A powerful beam of light cut through the forest, sweeping across the attackers. Chaos followed. Shouts, confusion, retreat. From above, a voice boomed through the storm, amplified and unyielding. "Drop your weapons, now!" The attackers scattered, some falling to their knees, others fleeing blindly into the trees. Moments later, figures in dark gear descended, precise and relentless. The SEAL team had arrived. At the same time, distant sirens echoed from the valley below. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service vehicles surged toward the old logging camp, lights flashing through the snow. The operation was over. Inside the cabin, silence returned in fragments. Bennett was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, conscious now, his hand gripping Atlas's fur weakly. "You found me," he whispered. Mara knelt beside them, her hands shaking only now that it was safe. Her face bore small cuts, but her eyes were clear. Atlas lowered himself beside Bennett, breathing steady despite the pain in his shoulder. He did not move until medical hands took over. Rowan stood back, chest rising and falling as the weight of it all finally caught up to him. In the days that followed, the forest slowly exhaled. Bennett recovered, later becoming a vital link between local authorities and wildlife protection units. The truth of the operation unraveled. A network trafficking protected animals under the cover of isolation and fear. Mara expanded the cabin into a winter rescue outpost. People came with injured animals, with hope, with stories of survival. The place became a refuge. Atlas healed, scars fading beneath thick fur. To the locals, he became more than a dog. He became a symbol of resilience. Rowan stayed, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because for the first time in a long while, he had found a place where the noise inside his chest finally quieted. When spring arrived, soft and slow, a small gathering stood beneath the trees. No ceremony, no spectacle, just quiet vows, shared glances, and a promise made without words. Atlas sat at the front, watching, and in the hush of the forest, something long broken finally felt whole. As this story comes to rest, it reminds us of something easy to forget in a noisy world, that miracles rarely arrive with thunder. Most of the time they come quietly, in the form of a hand reaching out, a heart that refuses to turn away, or a soul that chooses compassion when fear would be easier. What happened to Rowan, Mara, Bennett, and that brave dog wasn't luck. It was the quiet work of grace, the kind that moves through ordinary people when they choose to care, even when they're tired, even when they've been hurt before. Some call it courage. Some call it love. Many of us call it God, moving gently through the cracks of our lives. If this story stirred something in you, maybe it's a reminder that healing doesn't always arrive all at once. Sometimes it comes slowly, through small acts of kindness, through patience, through choosing to stay when it would be easier to walk away. And sometimes just being present for another soul is already enough. As you go on with your day or your evening, may you carry a little more gentleness with you. May your home feel warmer. May your heart feel lighter. And may God's quiet protection rest over you and those you love. If this story touched you, you're warmly invited to share it with someone who might need a moment of hope today. You're also welcome to leave a comment, not because you have to, but because your voice matters here. And if you'd like to walk alongside more stories like this, you're always welcome to subscribe and return when you need a